Welcome back! Today we're going to be looking at the Iliad, Book 14, the part of the story in which Hera just can't take it anymore and she has to get involved again. And so she comes up with a very creative way to turn the battle. But before we talk about the action, let's look at who some of the important characters are in this section. First of all, we return to a few of our favorite heroes. We start with Nestor, the old man with all the wise advice, and he's going to be evaluating the battle and seeing how things are going and trying to get some support from the leadership to get things back on track. We're also going to look back at some of our big heroes that we've seen in the past: Agamemnon, Diomedes, and Odysseus. All three of them featured heavily in the first half of the book, but they've all been injured and at this point are all laying out to recover from their injuries. We'll see all three of them reacting to the rapidly deteriorating Greek line and deciding how to respond to it in spite of the fact that they are unable to fight right now. And they'll be responding much in their old way. Agamemnon, who is fairly broken that Zeus has decided to side against him, will be more or less ready to bow out at this point. Odysseus is always being clever and thinking things through, thinking about the strategy of things. And Diomedes is always ready to plow ahead courageously, even now that he's too injured to really be able to run or walk with his broken foot. Aside from our human heroes, we're going to focus in on a lot of action with the gods in this book. We're going to see Hera again, who, as we've seen in the past, has no qualms about cheating in battle. And now that she's been pushed to the side by Zeus, she's had several books that she's had to sit out, and she can finally no longer take it. So she's going to come up with a clever way to get around Zeus's constrictions. We're also going to see Aphrodite, who generally sides with the Trojans, but in this particular book we return to her association with love and lust, and we're also going to see how easily manipulated she is by Hera. We're going to see Zeus, who, as the king of the gods, and who is supposed to be the most powerful one, can be rather easily tricked and manipulated as well. Finally, we see a character named Sleep, who is the twin brother of Death. And as a personification god, Sleep's pretty interesting. He's very wary of Zeus, knowing how easy it is to get in trouble. But he's also pretty easily manipulated, especially when it comes to lust. So let's see how this book plays out. The book starts as Nestor, who's been tending to the wounds of Machaon for the last several books, suddenly peeks out of his tent and looks around to see how things are going. They're going pretty badly. And although Poseidon's been giving little boosts to characters like Idomeneus and Ajax, the Greeks are still all the way into the fortifications, and things look pretty grim. So Nestor hurries off to see the commanders. He goes to Agamemnon, and there he finds Agamemnon and Odysseus and Diomedes all lying there with their injuries, unable to fight. And Nestor tells them all about how badly things are going. And when Agamemnon hears how badly things are going, he's ready to throw in the towel and just quit. Let's go ahead and pull our back line of boats out into the water, let everybody keep fighting. When night comes and the fighting has to stop, we'll pull all the rest of the ships. Let's cut and run. I'm done. Odysseus, though, immediately sees this as 1, cowardice, and 2, a really bad strategy. Not only is it calling it quits, but also it's a really bad retreat plan. If we retreat half of the army in the boats right now and then just use the rest of the army to hold off the Trojans until nightfall, imagine how that's going to make our fighters feel. They're barely holding on as it is. When they turn around and look behind them and half of the ships are leaving, they're going to lose any fighting spirit they have left. You're going to get us all killed. It's a terrible idea. Diomedes, on the other hand, comes up with the plan that the three of them, although they're too injured to really fight, can at least strap on their armor and kind of hobble out onto the field, and maybe their presence, at least, will give courage to the men. Yeah, they're not going to be able to press ahead to the front and do a whole lot of damage, but at least if they're visible, then maybe that will give inspiration to the men to get them to fight harder. So that's what they agree to do. They strap on their armor and they head out into the field. Poseidon sees them and gives Agamemnon kind of an attaboy. At this point, we cut up to Mount Olympus, where Hera has been sitting here, basically biting her nails this entire time. And she's seen that Poseidon has gotten a little bit involved, but Poseidon's definitely doing it in a very subtle way. He doesn't want Zeus to catch him. And she looks over there at Zeus, who isn't paying attention to the battle right now, but he's sitting up there on Mount Ida. And so suddenly she gets this really clever plan to get Zeus all distracted and provide an opening for Poseidon to really go to town on the Trojan army. So she gets herself all fixed up and looking really nice, fixes her hair and everything, and instead of going straight to Zeus, she goes to Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite and Hera have been at odds throughout this whole fight, because remember, Aphrodite was the one who won the contest. She got the golden apple from Paris, and so therefore the two of them have been kind of mad at each other for a while. And Aphrodite has been supporting the Trojans while Hera supports the Greeks. But Hera tries to play it all off like, oh, let's just, let's let that be a thing of the past. And Hera claims she's on her way to visit her step-parents, Oceanus and Tethys. Okay, so this is kind of an aside story. Back during the war with the Titans, when Zeus was fighting against all of the Titans, there were a couple of Titans whose names were Oceanus and Tethys, who were nice. There were occasional gentle Titans. And Hera stayed with them during the war for safety and protection. And so she is like a daughter figure to them. They're like parent figures to her. And so here she claims that she's going back to them, and she says, well, they've been kind of at odds with each other lately. They've been, their marriage is a little bit on the rocks. They need something to rekindle that, that romance, And so she says all this to Aphrodite, and she says she's going over there to visit them, and she asks if Aphrodite has anything to help the two of them get back together. And Aphrodite says, oh, I've got just the thing. And so she gives her this breastband that if you wear it, it helps to inflame the desire. So Hera's like, thanks! And she takes the breastband and she heads off. And then she goes to visit Sleep. And she tells Sleep that she has this clever plan to put Zeus out. She's gonna seduce him, and then Sleep will knock him out, and then they'll be able to do whatever they want on the battlefield. Sleep's like, no, I'm not messing with Zeus. I remember the last time you had a plan like this. Something about the time where we were trying to manipulate things with Hercules, and that went terribly wrong. Zeus was so angry with us. There's no way I'm going to do anything that's going to call up Zeus's wrath. At first, Hera offers him a throne made by Hephaestus, and Sleep's like, nah. But finally, Hera comes up with a way to sweeten the deal enough to really win over Sleep. She offers him one of the Graces as his wife. And as soon as Sleep hears that he might be able to win Pasithea over as his wife, he's like, oh, okay, sure, I'll do whatever. And so Sleep joins in on the plot. So Hera and Sleep tiptoe up to Mount Ida, and Sleep slips up in a tree and hides there, while Hera then casually meanders by Zeus. And of course she's wearing the breastband from Aphrodite, so as soon as she starts walking by Zeus, Zeus sees her and he's like, ooh, honey, you're looking good today. Where you going? Oh, I'm just going to visit my step-parents, Oceanus and Tethys. They're having a hard time right now. And Zeus is like, hey, why don't you go tomorrow? And then Zeus calls down this cloud and makes them this bed. And as the cloud descends, like covering the scene, Sleep's like, sleep. And so Zeus is knocked out. And Sleep takes that opportunity to dash down to the battlefield and tap Poseidon on the shoulder and say, hey Poseidon, it's all yours, do whatever you want. And so suddenly Poseidon, instead of walking around and disguising himself as various heroes, he suddenly pops into god form and stands in front of everybody. And he says, again, you Argives, you're handing victory over to Hector, Priam's son, so he can seize the ships and reap the glory? That's his hope, his prayer, thanks to Achilles, iron-bound by the ships and filled with anger still. But Achilles won't be missed so sorely, not a bit. If the rest of us can rouse and defend each other, so come, follow my orders, all obey me now. Gear up with the best and biggest shields in the camp, and encase our heads in helmets. Burnish, fire bright, and take in hand the longest javelins we can find. Then in for attack, and I will lead the way, and the sons of Priam won't stand up against us. Not for long, I tell you, not for all his fury. Let any rugged fighter who shoulders a small buckler pass it on to a weaker man and put on a bigger shield. So all the men switch to their big shields, and everybody beefs up their armor and gets ready to run out again. And here we have this fantastic description as Poseidon leads the army into the Trojans, and Hector is leading his side of the army into the Greeks. And there's a huge crash, and there's this wonderful sea imagery in that moment of the two sides crashing together. And as the two sides crash together, we get this fantastic clash between Ajax and Hector. But instead of Ajax being driven back by Zeus this time, and Hector being superpowered by Zeus, the shoe is on the other foot, and Ajax has the backing of Poseidon now. And so Hector throws first, and he throws the spear, and it hits Ajax right in the middle of the chest, right where the straps are crossing his chest, and the spear just bounces away uselessly. And so Hector has wasted his shot, and Hector tries to scramble back now that he doesn't have a spear. But as Hector backed away, great Ajax seized a rock. Countless holding stones for the fast-trimmed ships were rolling round among the fighters' feet. He hoisted one and heaved it at Hector's chest, and struck him over the shield rim, close to his throat, and the blow sent Hector whirling off like a whipping top, reeling round and round. As a huge oak goes down at a stroke from Father Zeus, ripped up by the roots, and a grim reek of sulfur burst forth from the trunk, and a passerby too close looking on loses courage. The bolt of mighty Zeus is hell on earth. So in a flash, for all his fighting power, Hector plunged in the dust, his spear dropping from his fist, shield and helmet crushing in on him, bronze gear clashing round him. And shouting squads of Achaeans raced in for the kill, hoping to drag him off, and hurling showers of spears. But none could stab or strike the Lord of Armies now. Too fast for them, there was a ring of Trojan chiefs, Aeneas, Polydamas, and the royal prince Agenor, Sarpedon of the Lycians' captain, valiant Glaucus, and all their troops spared nothing, pitching in, bracing their thick bulging shields to cover Hector. Comrades heaved him up and swept him clear of the fighting, far downfield, till they gained his team of racers, standing behind the rear lines and rush of battle, their driver and blazoned chariot held in tow. Then back to Troy they bore him, groaning hard. But once they reached the ford where the river runs clear, the strong, whirling Xanthus sprung of immortal Zeus, they lifted him off his car and laid him down on the level bank, splashing water over him. Hector caught his breath, and his eyes cleared. He crouched down on his knees and to vomit dark clots, then slumped back down, stretched on the ground again, and the world went black as night across his eyes. The force of the blow still overwhelmed his senses. So that didn't take very long. Basically, the very first thing that happens as the two sides clash is that Hector gets absolutely creamed by Ajax. And he barely gets rescued and pulled back. And yeah, so he's still alive, but he's now vomiting blood over by the river, and that sounds like some pretty bad internal injuries. And now with Hector knocked out like that, the rest of the Argives are going to definitely renew their courage and their strength and pour forward. They have a god on their side now. And the Trojans don't know what to do. And a few of the Trojans try to hold the line. Polydamas gets one more kill in, but the Ajaxes and Teucer and Antiochus and Meriones, they're all pouring forward and slashing through the Trojan lines. And the kills are coming so thick and fast that the poet calls on the muse to help him tell that part of the story. And it seems like little Ajax is doing the most work of all with his quick feet, dashing here, there, and everywhere and killing everybody. And so we come to the end of book 14. Now, we'll see what happens in the next book when Zeus wakes up and sees the effect of Hera and Poseidon's treachery. We'll see how he reacts to that. Okay, what about the key features of this book? As I already mentioned, there's a moment where the poet calls on the muse at the end of this book. That key feature of epic poetry, calling on the muse for inspiration to tell especially hard parts, especially lists of characters and things like that. There's also, as I mentioned, some really fantastic imagery in this book, especially the moment when Poseidon is leading the army forward and there's the sea imagery as the two armies clash together. Listen to this section. But over against them glorious Hector ranged his Trojans, and now they stretched the line of battle, strangling tight. The blue-haired god of the sea and Hector fired in arms, he driving the Trojans, the god driving the Argives. And a wild surf pounded the ships and shelters. Squadrons clashed with shattering war cries rising. Not so loud the breakers bellowing out against the shore, driven in from the open sea by the north wind's brutal blast. Not so loud the roar of fire whipping to a crackling blaze, rampaging into a mountain gorge, raging up through timber. Not so loud the gale that howls in the leafy crowns of oaks when it hits its pitch of fury, tearing branches down. Nothing so loud as cries of Trojans, cries of Achaeans, terrible war cries, armies storming against each other. There's the raging imagery of storm blowing in from the sea that mirrors the army rolling in against each other. There was also the epic simile of the tree being struck by lightning in the moment when Hector was knocked over by Ajax's boulder. And finally, there is the personification of Sleep, who's a very interesting character. I find it interesting that Sleep is a bit cowardly here, but also somewhat lustful. And I wonder if that has any implications on the way the Greeks viewed sleep, or if that's just a poetic feature here. One can't help but think about the Neil Gaiman version of Sleep as the brother of Death in his Sandman series. In any case, just as Zeus had gotten things where he wanted them, we've once again disrupted the action and turned the tide another direction, and again dismissed Achilles' participation in all of this. Who needs Achilles? We've got Ajax. He can take out Hector just fine. Thanks for watching. We'll find out what happens in the next book next time. You can click to subscribe or watch another video, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.